She was the wealthiest woman in Mecca. Kings sent her proposals. The proudest noblemen of Quraysh lined up for her hand.
And she rejected them all. Khadija bint Khuwaylid did not need a husband. She did not need protection. She did not need anyone. So why did this powerful woman, twice widowed, surrounded by riches, suddenly send a quiet message to a young man who owned almost nothing? What did she see in him that the entire city had somehow missed? The answer begins with a single business trip, a trusted servant watching from the shadows, and a moment under the burning sun of the desert that would quietly change the course of human history forever.
Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let us know in the comments which country you're watching from. If you're ready, let's begin.
To understand this story, you have to understand Mecca before Islam. It was a city of trade, idols, and pride. Hundreds of statues surrounded the Kaaba, the same sacred house that Ibrahim, peace be upon him, had built for the worship of one God. But the people had buried that truth under stone and superstition. They worshipped what their hands had carved. They buried their daughters alive out of shame. The strong devoured the weak, and a man's worth was measured by his wealth, his tribe, and his name. In the middle of all this lived a woman unlike any other. Her name was Khadija bint Khuwaylid. She came from the noble clan of Asad, a respected branch of Quraysh. But it was not only her lineage that made people speak of her, it was her mind. While the men of Makkah controlled the caravans and the markets, Khadija built a trading empire of her own. Her wealth rivaled the richest merchants of the city. Her caravans stretched towards Syria in the summer and Yemen in the winter, loaded with goods that returned, multiplied in profit. The people of Makkah gave her a title that says everything you need to know. They called her At-Tahira, the Pure One. In a city drowning in corruption, deceit, and broken promises, she stood out as honest, dignified, and untouchable. No scandal ever clung to her name. No man could claim she had ever lowered herself. She had been married before, twice. And twice she had been left a widow, raising children, carrying responsibilities that would crush most people. Yet she did not collapse into helplessness. She rose. She managed her affairs with a wisdom that left grown men speechless. And so the proposals came, one after another. The nobles of Quraysh, men with gold and power and famous names, sent word that they wished to marry her. These were not weak men. These were leaders, chiefs, the kind of men other men feared. She turned every one of them away. Why? Because Khadija was not searching for wealth. She already had it. She was not searching for status. She already wore it like a crown. She was looking for something the men of Makkah could not offer her. Something rarer than gold in that age. She was looking for character, for truth, for a soul she could trust. And here lies the great contrast at the heart of this story. The whole city measured value by what a person owned. Khadija measured it by what a person was. While everyone counted coins, she was quietly weighing hearts. Now, somewhere in that same city lived a young man in his 20s. He owned no caravans. He held no great wealth. He had no powerful father to open doors for him, for his father had died before he was even born, and his mother had passed when he was only 6. He had been raised first by his grandfather, then by his uncle Abu Talib. He had known the sting of orphanhood, the silence of having no one, the weight of standing alone in a world that respected only the powerful. Yet this same young man carried something no amount of money could buy. The people of Makkah, these same proud, dishonest, idol-worshipping people, had given him a name too. 2 names, in fact. They called him As-Sadiq, the truthful, and Al-Ameen, the trustworthy. Think about what that means. In a city where men cheated each other without shame, where lies were a tool of survival, the entire population looked at this one young man and agreed. This one never lies. This one never betrays. If you give him something, it returns to you untouched. His name was Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace and blessings be upon him. And though neither of them knew it yet, the path of the wealthiest woman in Makkah was about to cross the path of the most trustworthy young man in Makkah. Not by accident, never by accident, by the quiet, deliberate decree of the one who writes every story before it is lived. Khadija's business depended on one thing above all: trust. She did not travel with her caravans herself. She hired men to carry her goods to distant lands, to negotiate, to buy and sell on her behalf, and to bring back the profits. And here lay the danger. A dishonest agent could lie about prices. He could pocket profits. He could claim a loss that never happened. In a world without contracts and courts as we know them, a merchant lived and died by the honesty of the people she trusted. So when Khadija heard the people of Makkah speak again and again of a young man known as Al-Ameen, the trustworthy, her sharp, calculating mind took notice. She had heard the stories, how he never broke a promise, how he settled disputes without taking sides unfairly, how even his enemies could not accuse him of a single lie. In a city full of clever talkers and smooth liars, his reputation stood like a mountain. Khadija made a decision. She would offer this young man a position she had never offered anyone on such generous terms. She would entrust him with her merchandise, send him with her caravan to Syria, and pay him more than she had ever paid any agent before. Notice the contrast again. The men of Makkah chased her. They wanted her wealth, her name, her hand. But Khadija was not chasing Muhammad's wealth. He had none. She was drawn to something invisible, his honesty, his integrity. The thing that money cannot create and power cannot fake. The offer reached him. For a young man with little means, it was an opportunity that could change his life. But this was no ordinary employment. He was being entrusted with the goods of the most respected businesswoman in Makkah. One mistake, one moment of carelessness, and his spotless reputation could crack. He accepted. But Khadija, being the careful woman she was, did not simply hand over her wealth and hope for the best. She sent someone with him, a servant of hers named Maysara. His task was simple but important: travel alongside Muhammad, assist him, and watch. Watch how he conducted business. Watch how he treated people. Watch whether the famous reputation was truly deserved or whether it was just talk. So the caravan set out across the desert towards Syria. And here the story slows down, because what Maysara witnessed on that journey is the heart of everything. The desert is unforgiving. Long days of brutal heat, endless sand, exhaustion that wears down even the strongest men and reveals their true character. On a journey like this, masks fall away. A man's real nature shows itself when he is tired, hungry, and pushed to his limits. And Maysara watched closely. He saw a young man who did not cheat, who did not deceive the buyers or inflate his prices through lies, who conducted every transaction with a fairness that astonished those who dealt with him. While other traders haggled with tricks and deception, Muhammad traded with such honesty that people wanted to deal with him. His truthfulness was not a weakness in business. It became his greatest strength. The caravan's profits soared beyond anything Khadija had seen before. But Maysara saw something else too, something he could not fully explain. There are reports in the books of Syria that during this journey, a monk who lived near the trade route observed the young man and recognized signs in him that pointed to something far greater than a mere merchant, signs that hinted this was no ordinary man. And Maysara noticed strange things himself, a sense that this traveler was somehow protected, somehow watched over. Now we pause here with honesty, because authenticity matters. Some of these details about the journey come through narrations that scholars have discussed and weighed carefully, and the strength of each report varies. What is firmly established and beyond doubt is this: Muhammad, peace be upon him, traveled with Khadija's caravan. He conducted her business with extraordinary honesty. The trade returned remarkable profit, and Maysara came back deeply impressed by what he had witnessed. The caravan turned home toward Makkah, heavier with profit, and Maysara carried in his heart a report he could not wait to deliver. He did not yet know that the words he would speak to his mistress were about to set in motion a marriage that history would never forget. When the caravan returned to Makkah, two things came back greater than expected. The first was the profit. Khadija counted the returns and saw numbers higher than any of her previous ventures. The young man she had trusted had not only protected her wealth, he had multiplied it. But the second thing that returned was more important than gold. It was Maysara's testimony. The servant came to Khadija and poured out everything he had seen. He told her of the honesty in every deal, the fairness in every transaction, the dignity, the gentleness, the patience under the desert sun. He told her of the way people responded to this man, how they trusted him instantly, how his character seemed to belong to a different world than the harsh, cunning city they came from. And he shared the strange signs he had witnessed, the sense that this was someone marked for something far beyond ordinary life. Khadija listened, and something shifted inside her. This was a woman who had rejected the proudest noblemen of Arabia. Men of wealth and power had begged for her hand, and she had dismissed them without a second thought. She had no need for marriage. She had everything the world could offer, but now for the first time her heart was moved, not by riches, not by status, but by character, by honesty, by a soul that shone in a city of darkness. Here is the great turning point, and it reveals the depth of who Khadija was. In that society, a man approached a woman with a proposal. The man pursued, the woman waited. But Khadija was not a woman who waited for life to happen to her. She was wise enough, brave enough, and self-assured enough to take the step herself with complete dignity and propriety. She did not act recklessly. She did not announce it in the streets. She sent a trusted friend, a woman named Nafisa bint Munya, to quietly approach Muhammad and gently explore whether he would consider marriage. When Nafisa came to him, she spoke carefully. She asked why a man like him had not yet married. He answered honestly, he did not have the means. Marriage required resources, and he was a man of modest circumstances. Then came the question that would change everything. Nafisa asked, "What if you were offered nobility, beauty, wealth and honor? Would you respond?" He asked, who could possibly be offering such a thing? And she said the name, Khadija. Imagine that moment. This young man, an orphan who had grown up with nothing, who had known loss and loneliness and the weight of being alone in the world, being told that the most respected, most sought-after woman in all of Makkah wished to marry him, not for his wealth, for he had none, not for his lineage, though it was noble, but for the one thing he had cultivated his entire life, his truthfulness, his trustworthiness, his character. This is one of the most powerful lessons buried in this story. The world looks at what you have. Allah builds your future on what you are. The men who chased Khadija with their gold and their famous names walked away empty-handed. The young man who owned almost nothing but his integrity was chosen above them all. Muhammad, peace be upon him, took the proposal seriously and consulted his uncles, as was the honorable way. The families agreed. The matter was settled not in secrecy or shame, but in the open, with witnesses and dignity, exactly as a marriage should be. And so it was arranged. The wealthiest, most honored woman in Makkah would marry the most trustworthy young man in Makkah. Khadija was around 40 years old. He was around 25. The difference in age meant nothing to her because she was not searching for the things the world searches for. She had searched for a soul, and she had found it. The marriage was conducted. Her family was present. His uncles spoke on his behalf. A dowry was given, and two of the noblest hearts in all of Arabia were joined together. Neither of them knew on that day just how much they would one day depend on each other. Neither of them knew that the man Khadija had just married would, 15 years later, climb a mountain alone and return, shaking, terrified, transformed forever by an encounter that would shake the heavens. And when that day came, it would be her, this same Khadija, who would hold him, steady him, and become the very first human being to believe. The marriage of Muhammad and Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her, was not like the marriages of the world around them. In a society where women were often treated as property, where daughters were buried in shame and wives were counted among a man's possessions, this marriage stood as something pure and beautiful. It was a partnership of two souls who respected one another deeply. He honored her, she supported him. Their home became a place of peace in a city of cruelty. Khadija gave the Prophet, peace be upon him, children. The years passed in quiet contentment. He was no longer the lonely orphan. He had a home, a loving wife, a family. And she was no longer just the wealthy businesswoman the city admired from a distance. She had found a husband who treated her with a tenderness the proud men of Quraysh could never have offered. But the most important chapter of their story was still to come, and it would test everything. As the years went on, Muhammad, peace be upon him, found himself increasingly troubled by the world around him. The idol worship, the injustice, the cruelty of the powerful toward the weak. He began withdrawing from the noise of the city, retreating to a cave on a mountain called Hira, where he would spend days alone in deep reflection, searching for meaning in a world that had lost its way. Khadija did not complain. She did not demand he stay. She understood that her husband carried something heavy in his heart, and she gave him the space his soul needed. She even sent food up to him during his long retreats. This was love built not on possession, but on understanding. Then came the night that split history in two. He was alone in the cave of Hira when the angel Jibril appeared to him. The angel commanded him, "Read," and the prophet, who could not read, replied that he could not. The angel embraced him and squeezed him until he could bear no more, then released him and repeated the command. This happened 3 times, and then came the first words of revelation, "Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging clot." Read, "And your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man what he knew not." These were the opening verses of Surah Al-Alaq, the very first words of the Quran ever revealed to humanity. But the Prophet, peace be upon him, did not return home glowing with joy. He returned terrified. His heart was pounding. His whole body trembled. He rushed down the mountain and burst into his home and cried out, "Cover me! Cover me!" They wrapped him in a cloak until the fear left him. And then, listen to this moment carefully, because it is one of the most powerful moments in all of human history. He turned to Khadija and told her what had happened. He confessed his deepest fear, "I fear for myself." Here was the man the whole world would one day follow. And in his moment of greatest vulnerability, in his moment of fear and confusion, who was beside him? Khadija. And her response is recorded in the most authentic books of hadith, including Sahih al-Bukhari, and it deserves to echo through every heart that hears it. She said, "Never. By Allah, Allah will never disgrace you. You keep good relations with your kin, you help the poor and the destitute, you serve your guests generously, and you assist those who are stricken by calamity." Pause and absorb the wisdom in those words. She did not panic. She did not doubt him. She did not call him mad as others later would. Instead, she comforted him with logic. She reminded him of his own character. She was telling him, "A man like you, who does all this good, who lives with such honesty and kindness, God would never abandon such a man. God would never disgrace him. This is the same character that had drawn her to him years before, the same honesty, the same goodness." And now, in his darkest hour, that very character became the foundation of her unshakable faith in him. She became the first person, man, woman or child, to believe in the message of Islam, the first Muslim. Before Abu Bakr, before Ali, before anyone, it was Khadija, the wealthy woman who had once been impressed by a young man's honesty, now staked her soul, her wealth, and her entire life on the truth he carried. Now step back and look at the whole story, because it carries lessons that reach across 14 centuries and land directly in our hearts today. The first lesson is about what truly makes a person valuable. The men of Makkah measured worth in gold, tribe, and status. They were certain that wealth was everything, and yet when the most desirable woman in Arabia made her choice, she did not choose the richest man or the most powerful. She chose the most honest. She chose character over coins. She chose integrity over influence. How often do we get this backwards in our own lives? We chase money, image, followers, and status, believing these things define us. But Allah does not weigh us by our bank accounts. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Indeed, Allah does not look at your appearance or your wealth, but He looks at your hearts and your deeds." This is recorded in Sahih Muslim. Khadija understood this truth long before the world did. She looked past the empty pockets of a young orphan and saw a heart worth more than all the gold in Makkah. The second lesson is about honesty as a foundation for everything. The Prophet's truthfulness was not just a nice personality trait, it was the seed from which his entire future grew. Because he was Al-Ameen, Khadija trusted him with her caravan. Because of that trust, the marriage came. Because of that marriage, he found the love and support that would carry him through the hardest mission ever placed on human shoulders. And when revelation came, it was his very honesty that made Khadija believe instantly. Look at the chain. Every link was forged from one quality: truthfulness. Your character is not a small thing. It is the foundation upon which Allah builds your destiny. The third lesson is about the power of the right partner. Khadija was not a passive figure in this story. She was strong, wise, decisive, and deeply faithful. When the Prophet was terrified, she was calm. When he doubted himself, she reassured him. When the world would later reject him, she stood behind him with her wealth and her loyalty. The Prophet, peace be upon him, never forgot her. Years after her death, he still spoke of her with love. He once said of her words recorded in the authentic narrations, expressing how she believed in him when others disbelieved, supported him when others abandoned him, and stood with him when no one else would. He loved her so deeply that even after she was gone, the mere mention of her name would move his heart. This is the contrast between dunya and akhirah. The world remembers the loud and the powerful, but Allah honors the loyal and the faithful. And Khadija's name is honored to this very day, mentioned with peace and blessings by Muslims across the entire earth. The fourth lesson is the deepest of all. Allah's planning is perfect, even when we cannot see it. Think about every piece of this story. An orphan loses his parents and grows up with nothing. Yet that hardship builds in him a character of unmatched honesty. A woman is widowed twice and left to manage a business alone. Yet that very independence puts her in a position to recognize and choose the greatest man who ever lived. A simple business trip to Syria, yet it becomes the bridge between two destinies. None of it was random. Every loss, every hardship, every ordinary moment was a thread in a tapestry only Allah could see. The Quran says, "And it may be that you dislike a thing which is good for you, and that you like a thing which is bad for you. Allah knows, but you do not know." How many of us are sitting in our own hardships right now, unable to see the wisdom behind them? The orphanhood that felt like a curse was preparing a prophet. The loneliness was building a character. The struggle was writing a legacy. So when life feels uncertain, when you feel overlooked, when you wonder if your honesty and your goodness even matter in a world that seems to reward the opposite, remember this story. Remember the orphan who owned nothing but his truthfulness, and how that truthfulness drew to him the noblest woman in Arabia, and how their union became the cradle of the greatest message humanity has ever received. Your character is being watched, not by the people of Makkah, but by the Lord of Makkah and all the worlds. Stay honest, stay trustworthy, stay good when no one is looking, because the same Allah who honored Muhammad and Khadija is the same Allah who is writing your story right now. And his plan, no matter how it looks today, is always, always perfect. Don't forget to subscribe now so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. We sincerely request your du'as as we are going through some difficult times. Your prayers mean a lot to us and help us continue creating these videos. See you in the next video. May Allah be pleased with you all.